Welcome, everyone, to our monthly seminar on spirituality and health. And today we've got Byron Johnson. Dr. Johnson is going to be talking on the Global Flourishing Study, an empirical anchor for communities of practice. So let me just say a word about Byron. Byron and I have known each other for several decades, and we have been working, on this whole topic in one way or another of human flourishing. We didn't call it that then, but that's kind of what we've been doing, the connection between faith and human flourishing. So Dr. Johnson is a distinguished professor of the social sciences at Baylor University. He is the founding director of the Baylor Institute for Studies of Religion, as well as the director of the program on pro-social behavior. He is a faculty affiliate of the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University and is visiting distinguished professor in the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine University. He's a leading authority on the scientific study of religion, human flourishing, the efficacy of faith-based organizations, and criminal justice. He's done a lot of work in criminal justice, particularly with regard to the prison ministries, the Bible ministries in prisons, and he's been doing that for literally decades. He's been the principal investigator on grants from private foundations such as the Templeton Foundation, as well as from the Department of Justice, Department of Labor, Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, and the United States Institute for Peace. His newest book is The Faith Factor and Social Problems, Rethinking Evidence, Practice, and Policy by Baylor Press this year, 2025. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Byron. So take it away, Byron.
Well, first, let me just say it's a delight to be with you all. And as Harold said, we've just been friends for so long, and I just love him. He's not just such a great scholar, but such a great human being, and always look forward to the times when we're together. And it's far too infrequent. Harold, we'll have to do something about that. So it's great to be with you all. And I wanted to say a few things about this project before I go to a PowerPoint presentation. The Global Flourishing Study has been the project of a lifetime. And Harold, I was thinking the other day, this is about my 80th grant. So I've just directed so many of them, but nothing quite like this. This has been a different animal. And just for the folks on this webinar, a little history that you might be interested in. In 2018, I was invited to a 3-day conference, but with only 13 participants. And each of us had been doing research in areas connected to human flourishing. And this conference was hosted by Tyler Vanderwill at Harvard. And Tyler and I had known each other for several years, but we had not met in person until this 3-day meeting, where each of us gave presentations on our work as it relates to flourishing, and just a chance to meet each other and spend time together. And Tyler gave the first talk of that conference, and his talk was on causality. And it was a very powerful presentation of how we as scholars can do better, and that how so much of our work falls into the realm of correlational research, and how there is a need for causal studies. And that led me to have an idea, because I'm also affiliated with Gallup and have been since 2000. George Gallup Jr. Became a close friend of mine, and we did many national surveys together. And I had a meeting with the leadership of Gallup the week after this Harvard meeting. and it was going to be on something else. But then I started to think, what if we could do a global study on flourishing? And what if we could stay with these people, develop a panel? Might that be possible? So during one of the breaks, I cornered Tyler and I pitched the idea to him. And of course, he thought I was crazy to even ponder the idea of a longitudinal study that would be global. Um, but he said, "So do you have these contacts at Gallup that might be serious?" And I said, "Yes, I don't even know if they have the technology to make that happen. I know they have the World Poll, which is a cross-sectional study that takes place every year where Gallup interviews about 150,000 people annually." And I said, "So I think they have the infrastructure. The question is it even feasible to consider such a prospect?" And we then contacted the Templeton Foundation and said, "Would you be willing to attend a meeting with us at Gallup headquarters?" So this is all happening late 2018, early 2019. So that's how far back the origins of the project go. It took us 3 years to get it funded with support from 8 different foundations, all 3 Templeton philanthropies and 5 other foundations, just to get it funded. And one of the joys of this project has been to see how you can overcome obstacles. And so right off the bat, China kicked Gallup out of the country after 25 years. And we thought, oh no, we're going to lose China. That was one of the first countries that we wanted in the Global Flourishing Study. And so we're scrambling to think, what do you do now? And we thought, well, let's get Hong Kong in the study. And maybe get our foot in the door. So we have one territory in the study. And then shortly thereafter, Russia invaded Ukraine. And so for many months, we tried to keep both Russia and Ukraine in the study, but eventually they had to come out for many reasons, which was tragic. Because if you can imagine, it's kind of like having pre and post COVID data. What might flourishing look like in the midst of that tragedy? But it did not work out. So we had to replace both Russia and Ukraine with Sweden and Australia. So it's just obstacles like that that come along on a project of this scope and magnitude that you have to troubleshoot. So that's just kind of an introduction into some of the behind the scenes issues. But now, Harold, I'm going to try and share my screen, and I hope I can do this. Here we go. I think I see it. Okay, let me see if this is working. You are sharing screen. All right. Let me know if this works. Can you all see that? Good. Okay. So I've subtitled this an empirical anchor for communities of practice, and you'll understand why in a few minutes I've given it that title. There's enormous application of the Global Flourishing Study in ways that go way beyond scientific research. And so I'll get to that shortly. Some of you are quite familiar with human flourishing, and these are the domains developed by Tyler Vanderwill at Harvard that make up the index, the flourishing index, and more about this in just a few moments. This again shows you the domains there, and the key there is the countries that are participating. And you see there 22 countries. What I didn't mention a moment ago is last December, not December of 24, but December of 23, as we were wrapping up data collection for wave 1, I got a call from the CEO of Gallup saying, I have a meeting in Beijing. It looks like they're letting Gallup back into China. Would you want me to pitch the idea of the Global Flourishing Study? And I said, of course, even though that wasn't in the budget. So they did, and they came back, and a few weeks later, we were collecting data in China. So this time last year, we began data collection in China for wave 1, even though the data for wave 1 were released in February. So essentially, about a year ago, almost a year ago, the Wave 1 data were released, and we were just in the field in China. So we then collected data in China November, just 2 months ago. So we actually do have data from China for Wave 1 and Wave 2. And Wave 2 data will be released late February, early March, and people will have China. That's how we get to 64% of the world's population. Nationally representative, 5 years of panel data, truly unlike any other project before, where you were interviewing over 200,000 people in 46 different languages on 6 continents. It's been a heavy lift, and but all's going well. I just wanted to put this graphic up there. We have a design team that Templeton funded, and they're trying to take our work. And you can see this is just some of the ways in which they would like to communicate some of these domains. There's also in place a documentary that's being developed for the Global Flourishing Study itself, and with a group called Paragraph Films. They're actually bringing on board one of the producers from the Blue Zones to help with the documentary on the Global Flourishing Study. Here are the countries that you see, the 22 countries in the Global Flourishing Study, as well as Hong Kong. These are the partners. So I direct the Institute for Studies of Religion, as Harold mentioned. Tyler Vanderwill directs the Human Flourishing Program. And Gallup is, of course, doing the field work. They've had over 3,000 people in the field conducting these interviews all across the world. And then the Center for Open Science has become a key partner in the project. This was something that the Templeton Foundation required. And this has been one of the blessings of the project, to have the involvement of the Center for Open Science. And many of you may be familiar with them. They exist to promote integrity and transparency and openness in research. Brian Nosek, one of the co-founders, has become a good friend and colleague. And it was his work that began to help us understand actually how much fraud there is in the academic enterprise, which is tragic. You can see in an article that they published in Nature in 2023 that 10,000 papers alone were retracted from peer-reviewed journals. And Open Science wants to eliminate this issue of not being able to replicate studies. A lot of cancer research has fallen prey to faulty data. And so this is a huge concern. And so the Global Flourishing Study is the first study of this magnitude that will be open access, open science framework, which means people all across the world have access to the data at the same time that we have access as a team to the data. And will hopefully make it possible for people to replicate the findings and not have this issue where half the studies are not replicable. This is just the team between Harvard and Baylor, about 48 scholars in total that are working on the project. Here are some materials. All of these are available through the Center for Open Science. So it's not just the data that you get. You can also get the code-book methodology, the questionnaire development, the translation document. These are all materials that are free and downloadable that I think are great resources. So I hope that if you're interested in the Global Flourishing Study, you'll take a look at some of these resources. So on April the 30th, we are rolling out the first wave of publications from the Global Flourishing Study. What you're seeing here is the cover of Nature. We have a partnership that we've entered into with the Nature Springer journals, which is one of the marvelous developments of this project, is to enter into this relationship with Nature and the Nature portfolio of journals. So on April the 30th in Washington, D.C., we will be rolling out a a series of studies, and believe it or not, I know this sounds crazy, about up to 50 papers will be released on April the 30th, and another 50 over the next few months after that. So we have approximately 100 papers, many of which have already been accepted, many of which are in the revise and resubmit phase, and a few still yet to be submitted in the next few weeks. So one of the deliverables that we indicated for the Templeton Foundations would be that we would publish about 150 academic papers over the life of the 5-year project. But it appears that we may hit that just with wave one. We have a special issue of the International Journal of Wellbeing where we're doing country-specific papers on all 22 countries. So that's another 22 papers that's not even included in this slide. The other thing that I think you saw the Nature cover, that was the flagship paper for the Genome Project. And that's what Nature sent to us as an idea for what they would like to see happen with what we're calling the GFS Special Collection in Nature Springer. So the event on April the 30th, you can see the date. That's not true. It's April the 30th, 25. So we're fast approaching the launch, the rollout. You're invited to attend if you happen to be in the Washington, D.C. area, but it will be live streamed around the world. So hopefully you can tune in for that. I can't, so the findings are kind of embargoed till April the 30th, but I will give you some ideas about some of the maybe counterintuitive findings stemming from all of these papers. So many constructs way beyond just the flourishing papers. So topics like gratitude and generosity and optimism and hope and purpose, anxiety, depression, loneliness, marriage. The list goes on and on of papers that are currently underway. And these are some of the Nature journals that we will be publishing all of these papers in. Scientific reports, some of you are familiar with scientific reports. I'd say the bulk of the papers will be appearing in scientific reports, but others in these different journals that are on the screen in front of you. I use that title, the anchor. I think that the Global Flourishing Study is allowing us to kind of be the epicenter for so many things related to flourishing. We've done no advertising at this point, but both 60 Minutes and the New York Times have shown significant interest in the project. Somehow they've heard about it. I just did an interview, a story with the National Geographic that just came out this last week, and then they'll be following the event on April the 30th. The shocking thing is the interest that we've witnessed from so many businesses across the country that are interested in flourishing as kind of a galvanizing concept that they could use in businesses. Governments have reached out. Cities from all across the United States have called us with this great idea. They want to be America's first flourishing city, but other cities have had the same idea, and they're all reaching out. In fact, the state of Tennessee has reached out. They want to be known as the first flourishing state in the country. And one of the beautiful things is the data from the US. We have over 38,000 people alone in the study, and we are now have weighted data on all the states, and we will be able to look at flourishing within states, not just the US, but that we're very excited about as well. A lot of educational units have been reaching out to us. Matt Lee, a colleague of mine, just gave a presentation in Austin last week to a large group of school superintendents that were just enamored with the idea of flourishing. And houses of worship have actually been reaching out to us to see if flourishing applies to congregations. And of course, we think that it does. And in fact, we've written a booklet, which, Harold, I am more than happy to send. We printed these. This is Flourishing in the Church. It's a a group of people associated with Baylor or Harvard and one at Regent University, where we want to know how can science inform what churches are doing? How healthy are churches? And that, Harold, I know this is something that you've thought a lot about, and I have too over the year, but now we have the real likelihood of doing some serious work in churches. And so we published this document and we began to send it to a few people. And again, a number of inquiries. We're getting ready to launch a project called Flourishing and the Church, where we're looking at 5 congregations in San Francisco and 5 congregations in San Antonio, and then a congregation in Dallas, uh, just to see if you can get baseline information and then follow them over time. The congregation in Dallas just launched this initiative this last weekend, and they had 600 people from their congregation to show up to hear about it. And it's a 5-year initiative for the church in Arlington, Texas. We really believe that there is this possibility that if you could help people in churches to flourish, how might those people help their congregation? And then how might their congregation help the community? And I'm more than happy to send you copies of this document as well. And then I know this sounds crazy, but we believe there's a movement afoot of flourishing. It's not just schools and cities and states, but how might you think of developing what we call communities of practice? So this is a document that we produced for the Templeton Foundation, and specifically the Templeton World Charity Foundation, after a conference that we led for TWCF in Nassau in late 23. And this is talking about understanding flourishing through these communities of practice. And Matt Lee, formerly at Harvard, now at Baylor, is the mastermind behind these communities of practice. He started one in Cambridge with just a handful of people, then it just mushroomed. And so now what we're imagining is how can, for example, Baylor University be a community of practice itself? And then how can you have other places replicate those models? So the community of practice thing is a huge tool, we think, that could be used in schools and in business and in government and in other areas. And this is Matt Lee giving a presentation just a couple of weeks ago as a part of this whole community of practice, which again is very exciting. And as I may or may not have mentioned, you see there Baylor Collaborative on Human Flourishing, that it will be a part of a new institute that will be launched here the next couple of months on global human flourishing. And this will just allow us to strengthen our partnership with the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard and meet the demands that we think are going to be coming our way. So it's all very exciting because it's top academic rigor and quality, but it's also how could you take this and apply it in ways that are meaningful, that affects public policy. Did want to mention our one blind spot with the Global Flourishing Study is that it is a quantitative study. And after the launch of the project in the late fall of 2021, I received a call the next day from the dean of the School of Music here at Baylor University. And he said, "Congratulations, I heard about this big project that got funded. So my question is, how many items did you put on the Global Flourishing Study about music? Because I believe that music is something that helps people worship. And I think the act of worship is something that helps people to flourish." And I had to tell him we don't have any items on music, regrettably, on the Global Flourishing Study because we had to cut items. And this is one of the problems when you have a 22-minute survey. You worry about issues like fatigue. And so we had to cut more than half the items out of the project. So many items were lost, and this is definitely a blind spot. The good news is there's enormous potential for projects to emerge as a result of the Global Flourishing Study that would help us fix this. And so you could imagine over the next number of years, projects not only on music, but projects that deal with the arts more generally. How does art and film and literature, as well as music, help people to flourish? So this qualitative aspect is a key part that has been missing, that one of the groups that has taken interest in our work wants to help us address that concern. And this is the Cathy family, associated with Chick-fil-A. And so we've been working with them, and we've launched a study in Trilith, which is a little community just outside of Atlanta, where there are these film studios that are the newest and most technologically advanced film studios in the world. And so all the Marvel movies, for example, are made in this little community of Trilith, which 10 years ago was a farm, and now it's this little community with about 1,000 people living there. And the community is based on the domains of human flourishing. So for the last couple of years, we've been going there, working on a case study of Trilith. I'm also doing a major research project at the Mississippi State Penitentiary, also known as Parchman, which is one of the notorious prisons in America, very violent, corrupt prison. But there are some transformations taking place in that prison, and I've been asked to do a major study there that we launched 2 years ago. So we're doing a documentary in that prison as well. And then there's going to be a summit in May, a flourishing summit hosted by Dan Cathy, where we will premiere the Trilith documentary. And what I thought I would do to kind of wrap things up is, and these are just some websites where you can go and get information that would be of use, I hope. And I'm going to now see if I can, Harold, switch over to the film. Bear with me as I do this because I am technologically challenged. Okay, I don't want that. So I have a trailer to show you. Here we go. Now let's see if I can show the trailer. I'm going to go back to share screen, Harold. Let's hope this works. And let's see. Okay, here we go. This is a 3-minute trailer of the documentary on human flourishing.
Sound speed? Speeding.
Can you see this?
You want to take one, Parker? Thanks for joining us today. Could you, in your own words, define the word flourishing? What would that word mean from your standpoint?
You know, the first word that comes to my head is breathing. If you are flourishing, you are breathing deeply and inhaling life in all of its forms.
If you want to flourish, you have to be willing to stretch yourself. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, to say you don't know.
I think when it comes to flourishing, it is what you make it. My mother always used to say, be the change that you want to see. And that's what's so beautiful about the people here in the Trilith community.
I would say love is what powers flourishing, the communal aspect of it. That if someone over here isn't flourishing, that has to be my problem.
One thing that I found is crucial when it comes to flourishing is safety, how I perceive others, and most importantly, how they perceive me.
And thrive is like a independent little plant, but to me, flourishing is like the beauty of a garden.
Flourishing looks a lot like floundering. Maybe sometimes the older that I get, the more that I can celebrate the losses that are leading me to these new checkpoints of just the magical goodness of life.
Allowing yourself to be open to all that comes, because you do not know what joy it will bring, even if it seems at the time that it is an utter disaster.
Flourishing it's challenging because you can't just check the box. It's humans. It's us choosing to live in vulnerability together, to grow, to lean into that, to send help when another side needs help. And I think that that's something that makes it very complicated, but it also makes it very beautiful.
Not pursuing this utopia, pursuing utopia, right? This sense of how can I make the next day better?
Those who are leading in Phyllis right now, they want each and every person to flourish. And for me to be 95 years old and enjoying life as much as I am, it was unthinkable for me as a young man. I want to live the next day and see what else they're going to do.
Sir John Templeton once said, "I'm eager to learn," meaning we don't have all the answers. We have some ideas that are based on data, but we need more ideas that are based on the experiences and the lived stories. I hope that I will have a better answer over time, but it's a question worth answering.
Okay, Harold, I'm back. That trailer is that captures just a little bit of hour-long interviews that we did with a bunch of people, which doesn't happen in the Global Flourishing Study. So it makes it really, it helps us get these rich insights that you otherwise would not get. And then we did a series of focus groups. And so I hope to see the rough cut of the full film in the next few weeks, and then it'll be premiered on April the 30th. And I just feel like the combination of the Global Flourishing Study and then to be able to do these short films of in-depth research in these communities is absolutely vital. So the project at the Mississippi State Penitentiary, where I'm headed tomorrow morning, it has really been fun. We not only survey the prisoners, but we get to interview them over and over again. And one of the things that we're looking at is flourishing on death row, where you have individuals that all are awaiting execution, and there is a congregation on death row. So we filmed the congregation, we filmed their Bible studies, we filmed their services, and we've interviewed them. And these are people that on all the domains of flourishing, except for the financial security, are doing really well. And so I think that the Global Flourishing Study in many ways will provide findings that resonate with previous findings, but also provide counterintuitive findings. And I think that looking at Trilith, you might say, well, yeah, it's this idyllic community. But if you look at death row, you would not say that's an idyllic community. And we're finding similar things at a maximum security prison that we're finding in a community like Trilith. So maybe I should just hit the pause button there and open it up for questions from anybody.
Byron, I'm almost shocked at the incredible work that you are doing. I've never heard of this, before. Anyone doing something of this magnitude, scope, and doing both qualitative, quantitative research, longitudinal research, and transforming entire communities is really incredible. So I'm going to open it up. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Byron a question. This is an incredible opportunity to ask the leader of this once in a generation study any questions that you have. Okay, let's see. Dorothy, I think Charlotte's next. Charlotte, and then
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, great to see you, Byron, and thank you so much, Harold and Byron, for this wonderful opportunity. I'm really curious, Byron, when you were talking about some of the different virtues that are being studied in the GFS, are any of the current papers coming out going to look at the intersections of different virtues, or are they more looking through the lens of a particular virtue?
Yeah, it's more the latter on this initial set of papers. And, just for everybody to know, Charlotte is, in fact, one one of the scholars on these papers that are coming out. Tyler Vanderweel, who's the other co-leader, is, as you all know, brilliant. And about half the papers are looking at childhood predictors, and about half of the papers are focusing on demographic factors. And this is an outcome-wide approach. It allows us to produce an awful lot of work in a short period of time. And one of the strokes of genius, by the way, is that when Nature started talking to us, we knew that in the review process, methodology is always going to be central, right? So we said, can we agree that we will submit a series of papers on methodology, and if those papers are accepted for publication, then we won't go into methodology on every paper. We'll refer to these papers. And so this has helped us to go through the review process so much more quickly.
Mhm.
But, Charlotte, to answer your question, I think that we had a team meeting here last week to talk about what other things people might want to begin to look at. And so we're kind of cracking a whip saying, please keep cranking out the papers. But for wave two, we're not asking people to lead two papers. We're asking them to lead one so that they can develop these other unique ideas of what they would really like to do without trying to push out so much scholarship. But I think, ironically, we're going to probably push out more, because when people came up with ideas, it wasn't just one or two, like right? It was 3 or 4 new ideas. And it was really magical to have us all together for the first time in this big room where you get to talk to people that you've only Zoomed with. And, because you've been here, Charlotte, just the in-person thing, you can't put a price tag on it. So we are so excited about possibilities for the ways in which one can begin to advance our knowledge with the virtues in all these culturally diverse communities. And one of the spectacular things, as you know, Charlotte, is that REN is so big, we're not doing it now, but we will be able to look at different religious traditions and see how these different religious traditions shake out. What we are doing in the Wave 1 studies is looking at religious involvement. How often do people participate in religious services? How often do they pray? Things like that. But we're not comparing Islam to Judaism. But that's coming. That's on down the road. But that's one of the interests that I have, is understanding virtues from different religious traditions. And we're also, every time someone asks a question like yours, Charlotte, it just gets my brain going. We are bringing online 22 research satellites. So every country will have 3 to 5 scholars from that country. This is in addition to the 48 people that are currently working between Harvard and Baylor. And then we want to work with those folks to provide them whatever they need to, so you have scholars from the Philippines that are producing papers on the Philippines. And I just think, because we've had so much coming from the West, yes, it's a global study, but boy, it'd be great if you could have all these people from these 22 different satellites. And so that's just come together in the last couple of months. And so the first 2 papers have just been completed in terms of a draft coming from scholars anchored in these other countries. So as you know, Charlotte, the sky is the limit in terms of the possibilities of ways in which we think about virtues. And yeah, I'll stop there, and I hope that
All
helps.
right. Thanks so much.
Okay, I think
Together
Dorothy.
next.
I think Dorothy is next.
Byron, yeah, Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Byron, you're setting up a blueprint for profound social change throughout
Mm.
the world here. But my initial question was, how would you start a project as a qualitative work for studying flourishing in old age and older adults? And,
Oh, oh,
I was part of a study um, studying uh, older faculty, and they stopped at 80. I mean, they, but we're out there. We're
you
out
know,
there.
Dorothy, this is such an important issue that you've raised. There are enormous age effects when it comes to flourishing. And as some of you will know, it's very interesting. The older we get, the more we fall apart and have health issues. But there's significant research that asks elderly people how they're doing physically, and they report that they're doing better than people in their 30s. Um, so there's much we need to learn about the connection between age and flourishing, between gender and flourishing, north and south, east and west and flourishing. But one of the things that we're beginning to think about would be raising the funding to do sampling from the Global Flourishing Study that would allow us to do interviews globally. And so, again, these things are costly in terms of budgets, but that's what we would like to do in terms of a phase two. What could you do to focus on people and talk to them? So not just talk to them, but talk to them over time to get an in-depth kind of understanding, an ethnographic look at the aging process. And one of the things that happened when I gave a talk at Trilith, after the talk, they broke into small groups and they were discussing around the room. And so I was just walking around the room, listening to the conversations, and I couldn't help it. I got drawn into a conversation with 5 women, and one of them may have been in her 30s, but most of them were retirement age. And each of them were talking about flourishing through the midst of illness and death that they had experienced in their families in the months leading up to that talk. And it was just so inspiring to hear how, they were giving a perfect example of when we say flourishing is not the absence of suffering. And these people were flourishing through those difficult times and seasons that they were going through. So I'm so glad you mentioned this, because that's at the top of the list, is to look at the issue of age.
Well, it's out there. And
Yeah.
I'm 84 years old, and I'm still teaching, and I just paid off my student loans last year for my doctorate.
Well, Dorothy, one of the things that, and you saw in that video where I invoked Sir John, we need to learn. It's not like we figured this all out. There's a sense in which we need humility, and what is it that we can learn from people? And I think we're gonna get answers that we're not expecting in places that we're not expecting, like death row, and like a village in India that's 100 miles from an urban environment, where people can tell us what we need to learn to understand this whole idea of flourishing. So thank you, Dorothy.
And
Great.
and you're really looking at the bottom line is the mystical experience throughout all cultures.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And by the way, Americans especially are huge into rankings, aren't they? And you can't help it. You put it in these tables, and that's where they're going to go. which country does the best, which country does the worst. And of course, that's a problem. We don't want that to happen, but I know that's what you all are thinking too. So Indonesia comes out at the top and Japan comes at the bottom. Um, but we don't emphasize that because there are some findings that come out of Japan that are also encouraging. But you know how people are like with the Global Happiness Report, the World Happiness Report. They want to know which country comes out at the top, and is the U.S. in the top 20 or did we fall out? That kind of a thing. But anyways, next question. I see a hand.
Okay, Camelia, go ahead. Ask your question. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I've been so passionate about this study for years since I first heard about it from Tyler Vanderwill in Duke seminaries. So I have two quick questions. The first one is, is Canada participating in it, and do you need another satellite in central Canada for more collaborators?
You know, Camelia, the Canada is not a part of the study. But early on, someone from Canada contacted us and said, you know, we would love to be in this study. How does one get in the study? And, you know, the countries originally were picked for, you know, diversity, population, GDP. There were some factors that went into selecting countries. Canada wasn't in that initial group, but we immediately told the people we would love to add Canada. And then we had, you know, people reaching out to us from Greece and Spain. You know, how can we get into this study? Well, obviously, it cost. And so, you know, we went to Gallup and said, how much would it cost to add a country? And, you know, it's like $1 million or $2 million to add a country to the Global Flourishing Study. So it does come with a cost. And, but I had a conversation with Gallup a couple of weeks, maybe last month, and they were saying, you know, Byron, with this new institute that Baylor's going to be launching, we need to talk about expanding the Global Flourishing Study to 50 countries. And I'm thinking, whoa, slow down. We've got all we can handle right now. But it's at some level, I like to dream big. And I'm not happy that countries like Canada are not included. And it would be great to get them in. It would be great to get Russia and Ukraine back in. And so stay tuned. Who knows? With proper funding, these things are all a possibility.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Sure.
I mean, the wealth of information is going to be, you know, outstanding. It's a lot of information about flourishing in the face of suffering, of adversity. Now, from the information you have collected already, do you foresee the possibility of an intervention, a way of using this information to transform communities, not through knowledge, but through an
it's a great, Camelia, great question. I think there is real opportunities for projects to spin off from the Global Flourishing Study with interventions in mind. I think that's largely for other people to kind of consider. We would love to be a part of those kinds of conversations. And it's so easy to imagine why that would need to happen and how that would need to happen. It's not in our proposal to do the intervention projects, but we hope, just like the qualitative piece that is missing from the Global Flourishing Study, we're trying to think of ways in which new projects will emerge. It doesn't matter where they are. Other universities, great. If there's any way we can be an assist, we want to be able to do that. But clearly, you're going to need these interventions, especially, you know, in educational institutions or wherever. I think the Flourishing Church project, which is very small right now, is an example of what could happen if a congregation determines we would like to do this. We want to do a baseline, and then we want to have this intentional teaching, preaching series over a period of time that deals with flourishing, and then we want to implement communities of practice in the congregation, and then we want to know how that affects the congregation. I mean, these things are easy to imagine that could be byproducts of the whole project.
Thank you.
Great. Now there's VHA Ham Tucked, who is next. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Donna Tucker. I had a question in terms of the demographics in which you're utilizing. Are you also, I know you're going into the prisons, you're going into different global areas. Are you also looking at going into inner cities or low income areas, or just areas where they're not getting being taught healthiness, being taught proper religion? You have a church on every corner, but you're not being taught things.
Sure. Well, first of all, the prison research and the Trilith research is not a part of the Global Flourishing Study. So that is work that we're doing separately, not a part of the GFS, but we want to look at what we're seeing in those other projects through the lens of what we're seeing in the Global Flourishing Study. So the Global Flourishing Study provides nationally representative data in these 22 countries and one territory. So we will be able to look at urban versus rural to get at part of your question. And obviously we have demographic data that will allow us to look at things related to education and income. So all of that will be collected, has been collected and will continue to be collected, so that we have great demographic data. And it's going to be, fascinating to mine that. One of the things that we are finding is that people, for example, in the developing world have more meaning and purpose than people that live in the developed world. That's one of the I don't think that's counterintuitive for you, but it will be counterintuitive for most people when they hear about that. But there aren't that many universal findings in the Global Flourishing Study. There are a handful of them. Parenting matters is one of them. Good relationships between children and their parents matter, and religious service attendance is close to being a universal finding too, in the data. So yes, we do have those kinds of things, but I did want to distinguish between the Global Flourishing Study and some of these other little projects that we're doing that are more qualitative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 8 more minutes, and I'd love to have some of you mine the wisdom and the incredible work that Byron is doing here. Please unmute yourself and ask a question. Looks like Joseph.
Hi, I'm Rachel Joseph. I'm calling from Liberty University. We had the theme, I know you were here as a speaker one time or last summer, I think. So our theme for this year is faith and flourishing. So this year, before the spring semester started, all the faculty presentations were based on faith and flourishing. So it is a nice and intellectual topic which is presented here is a great advantage for us as faculty here. Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, thank you. And one of the things I was thinking when you said Liberty, I was talking to the provost recently about Baylor becoming a community of practice, and the discussion quickly turned to, could Baylor help other Big 12 schools, and Big 12 meaning a conference of schools that Baylor's a part of, could that be replicated on these other campuses? I think it's perhaps a much easier pitch at places like a Liberty or a Biola or Calvin or Hope. But it would be really interesting to see what kind of a reception a campus, a state university would have, or a private secular university would have in terms of a community of practice around flourishing. In addition to what you're saying, Rachel, about faith and flourishing.
Yeah, I would say that there are a lot of Christian universities interested in that as a
Sure.
goal.
I
Thank you.
see. Couple
Very
more
good.
hands.
Khalid, you're up next.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Dr. Johnson, wondering what advice do you have for early career scholars and physicians who are interested in perhaps dedicating a part of their career to flourishing and research and flourishing? Any kind of, Dr. Koenig offers the five-day research seminar in the summer on religion and spirituality and health. Anything that Harvard or you offer in terms of training for early career scholars?
You know, one of the things that I was just going to say is keep in mind this is open access data. And so individuals have to register for the data through the Center for Open Science. But the Wave 1 data were released almost a year ago, February the 13th. So people have access to the data. And I would encourage people to take advantage of it. In addition to reading studies that will be coming out in the next couple of months and the next 6 months, there'll be a bunch of them. And since it's a collection, it will be easy to see the entire collection of papers. It's wide ranging. So for example, we have papers on smoking and drinking. And so these are health related issues that are the top line in terms of what kind of research is coming out. But I mean, for the young scholars on our team, this has been an amazing thing that they're getting published in journals like Scientific Reports, Nature Communications, and Nature. And this, I think, opens the door for people that are early in their career to fast track by accessing the data, because, you know, a lot of people still have not heard of the project. And so now would be the time to access the data. And either as an individual or as a group of people to consider studies. There's so many possibilities of what one could look at here. And with Wave 2 being released now in about 6 weeks, for the first time, we'll have 2 time points. And we do a mid-year retention. So that mid-year data we're hoping will be released at the same time with Wave 2. So it does give us a few more variables that are not in the regular annual survey. And we do ask about beauty, nature, and music in the mid-year because we got the criticism that those items were out. Well, in the mid-year survey, we're just trying to stay in touch with people. So we came up with a few items just to see how you're doing, has your address changed, et cetera. And then we threw in these other items that will be of interest to people. So I really do hope that this will put jets on the careers of young scholars to access this data. Harold, I know we're getting close on time.
Getting close. Laura, you've got the last question.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm with my own little company, Homegrown Yoga and Massage in Longmont, Colorado. Worked in public health a long time, but thank you, Dr. Johnson, Byron Johnson. I love this project. I love the positivity of it, the inclusivity of it. My 2 questions are, what policies do you imagine? You had brought up the word policy. The other thing I was so inspired by the Integral Yoga Institute in San Francisco. That's where I did my training. It does incorporate all the different religions, including a black dot, the religion yet known. So I was curious if there's any work with the yoga community around your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. You know, we do have items that deal with meditation, but we have not had any intentional conversations just yet with people from that community. But you can already imagine ideas in your head about different world religions and yoga and meditation. And then how about this? Atheism. I mean, we actually have data on that. No one on our team has even thought to look at atheism yet. But what about the role of meditation and prayer and things like we've found from other research that people who claim to be atheists actually indicate that they do pray, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. but how do atheists do when it comes to indicators of flourishing? So there's just so many ideas, but I do think the one that you're raising is an excellent one, but we've not yet had that conversation.
And the policy, what sort of
Oh, the
policies?
policy. Oh my goodness. You know, just with the childhood predictor papers, there's so many ideas about what kind of interventions we can do that would emphasize, you know, parenting and close relationships, that would help. I mean, kids from abusive homes, definitely uh, don't do as well when it comes to human flourishing as adults. So there's so much information in these first wave of papers about the need to invest early in children as a preventive mechanism. And so there you can imagine a host of interventions that would be helpful, since we know that these childhood experiences are highly predictive of languishing as well as flourishing. So educational interventions as well. There's many, and then of course, as Harold knows, the implications for medicine are significant, and he's been a leader in that area for so many decades. But I sense I'm out of time, Harold. It's been what a treat to be with you all again, and I look forward to more such meetings.
You're out of time, Byron, and we're all so sad over that because we just love what you've been presenting. So thank you all for all of the questions and interacting with Byron. So much, what an incredible wealth of information. And this, of course, will be online. It's all videotaped and just it'll be on our website, as well as Byron's PowerPoint presentation. So in any case, we'll see you next month. God bless and stay safe.